All right, Baltimore City Council, Ways and Means Committee, we're back for City Council Ordinance, don't tell me, 23-0381. Ordinance of estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2024. I'm Eric Costello, Councilman from the 11th District. To my chair of the committee to the right, Councilman Isaac Gitzi Schleifer, 5th District member of the committee. To my left, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District member of the committee. To my right, Tony Staffer. To the committee, we've got representatives from Council President Nick Mosby and Mayor Brandon Scott's offices. We are here for Baltimore City Information Technology, BCIT. Before we begin and I turn it over to you, CIO Carter, as we have done in years past, the committee has accommodated BCIT's requests on items that are off limits during the duration of the hearing. Those items are: 1, requesting specific details into the 2019 ransomware attack and its findings. As of right now, Baltimore's ransomware attack is still an ongoing federal investigation, and BCIT will be limited in what they can say. Number 2, requesting specific details regarding BCIT's IT security, current state, or gaps needing remediation. And 3, requesting specific details about infrastructure, applications, or data vulnerabilities or assessments related to the results from these areas. Colleagues, are there any questions or concerns with the list of topics that are off limits for this year's budget hearing? Seeing none, CIO Carter, I'll turn it over to you. Before you pull up your slide deck, if you could please introduce your senior team that you have with you, including name and position title, and then you can jump right into the slides. That's the technology thing.
Thank you, thank you. To my right, I have our Chief Administrative Officer and Chief of Staff, Layla Lehman. To her right, I have Chris Harrington, our Chief Financial Officer or Fiscal Officer. We have Art Ray in charge of our Public Safety IT. We have Lisa Allen. Everyone knows Lisa, but she's our 311 Director. Behind me, we have Kenya Osley. She is our BDE, Broadband and Digital Equity Director. And to our left, we have Fabian Dorchus. She is our Program Manager for Legislative Affairs for BCIT. So we'd like to thank you all for allowing us to come here. We were looking forward to this, this hearing because we believe we have a really good story to tell. It's not to say that we don't have challenges and issues, but we feel that we're on a really good path to making good technology decisions, implementations for the citizens of Baltimore. So I want to talk about who we are. Our mission is to provide sustainable infrastructure and technology to support and enhance city agencies, communities, and businesses to meet city and mayoral goals. Over the next decade, our vision, we want to engage all city agencies, businesses, and residents to design, build, and implement technology that creates a safe, thriving, and smart city. And our values, innovation and excellence, customer focus, accountability and credibility, respect and inclusion, efficiency and safety. And the intent of showing this slide is to certainly give you a sense of who we are, but we start our meetings with the slides, whether we're with customers or with our employees. And when we have our all-hands meetings, which we have twice monthly, employees will give this slide to us and talk about a value that they are exhibiting and share that experience with other employees. Okay. This slide here describes the services that we provide. I want to note some of the new services, the broadband and digital equity that are public-facing, as well as the City Watch and CCTV cameras are all new in many ways for us. At the end of the day, we have customer core services, end user services, and support that's provided from BCIT across all of Baltimore City. We are governed by a IT-wide steering committee that consists of the CAO, the DCAO, the deputy mayors, finance head, laws head, as well as agencies that are operating in nature to ensure that we are grounded in the decisions that are made for Baltimore City. HR is also a member of that IT-wide committee. In fact, we had to reschedule it due to this committee hearing, but we'll pick that up shortly. I'm having clicker issues, but. Okay, so this is our org chart, and if you look at our org chart, just to sort of reiterate, Service 757 City Watch, that's Art Ray. Administration, that's Layla Lehman. 311 Call Center, 804, Lisa. And the Service 873 Digital Broadband and Equity, or Digital Equity and Broadband, that's Kenya. Two of our directors who are not here, Bruce Givens, who does our infrastructure, and Kevin Carney, who does our security, our chief security officer, as well as Rob McBride, who does all of our applications. And I want to point out that when you look at our budget really covers what we call basic services, the things that keeps the lights on. When we get into additional projects, we use capital dollars, and we use those for those incremental projects. One thing I want to take the time to explain, because you're going to hear this topic throughout this meeting. You'll also see it as a driver for the overall cost increases that we have. In addition to, it'll be mixed in a number of ways, and that is the BCIT's cost optimization project. We did a pilot last year, and that pilot consisted of working with DGS, DOT, and DHCD. And the goal of that pilot was to streamline the delivery of IT services across those agencies. So what that means is that the infrastructure groups that they had within their organizations were brought into BCIT. The people that did applications work and data work resided in the actual agency with dual reporting relationships to the agency head and to BCIT's head. Now, when you look at that cost optimization, we spend about $110 million a year across all IT across the city. Half of those dollars are in BCIT, the other half are in agencies scattered about. What we found is that we are not optimal. We have the ability to streamline services and provide better measured services, better attention to standard practices, which cost optimization is, as we manage IT. To bring those people into BCIT, we did assessments of each individual. Each individual had training programs. They were slotted into roles. We did cost studies or salary studies to make sure we were being competitive. Now employees have a career path that's broader than just a role within an agency doing IT. So when you think about what we've done in IT and the drivers of our costs above and beyond prior years is pretty much dictated by several items, and I'll ask our Chief Fiscal Officer to talk to what some of those drivers were. Chris?
Yes, good afternoon. Some of those key drivers, particularly as you look at some of our spending year over year, is that we're looking to really sort of budget accurately and correctly as it relates to personnel. Historically, we've had a number of FTE vacancies, and when we've had some challenges in terms of filling those roles, we've gone the contractor route. But we've maintained those vacancies on the books, and so our budget may look like, at least 2 years ago, looked like we had a lot of vacant FTE positions. I'm really proud of the work that we've done over the last 2 years to get those vacancies down by salary saving those positions, as well as then funding those contractor roles so that our budget is much more accurate, much more transparent, and really reflects how we operationalize in terms of staffing. There are a couple of other, key cost drivers that Todd mentioned as it relates to inflation, as well as some adjustments related to the enterprise staffing agreement that was renegotiated for where we source a lot of our contractors. And so we can go into details about those, but some of those are just really our critical cost drivers.
Thank you. So we're going to get into each of our services. We'll move quickly so you can get to your questions. City Watch. So last year when we came here, we had committed to installing over 312 City Watch cameras. Here to say that we did that. We have another 225 cameras to install. When we do that at the end of fiscal year '24, we will be able to put our cameras on a life cycle replacement rotation program, because what these replacements are is getting older end-of-life cameras out of service. So that is one thing that we want to certainly come back to talk to you about. As of today, our camera availability rate is 95%. I can tell you when I look at these numbers prior, we got good numbers. We have a good system to determine availability of cameras, and we have a good crew that's managing the assets around it. We will get to a point where we will work with BPD and other agencies to figure out what's the long-term expansion plan for City Watch and City Watch cameras. We just maintain the cameras. We don't drive the program, so we will do that in partnership with Baltimore Police Department. Administration. Administration is an area that really helps us scale. It has a number of functions that we rely on to provide critical services. They include our... Oh, I hit it twice. Sorry. Thank you. Appreciate that. So it includes our contract office, our procurement office, our budget and fiscal activities, invoice processing. And we're proud to say we were at a peak of roughly about $8 million in, I'm not proud to say that, but we were at $8 million in invoices that were greater than 30 days. We are now down to less than 500K. And that's a stat that I look at every day, and it has not only what the performance is for BCIT, but it has the performance for all the other agencies. The other thing that we're really proud about that administration is driving, in addition to that cost optimization program that I talked about, is the fact that we survey our employees. We survey them every year. And from that survey, we get, really, I think, good scores, but we don't give up on that. We also have focus groups that are employee-led to drill into the comments from the surveys. These are anonymous surveys. The data from the surveys that help us figure out ways that we can continue to improve and can continue to improve our service to either agencies or the public. And so we use that as a critical tool of not only kind of going back to our mission, vision, and values, but making sure that we keep honest to what those values are and deliver the service that we have. Okay. Enterprise, Innovation, and Application Services. I know some of you here have a vested interest. I'm looking at Councilwoman Ramos because I know you have probably a number of questions. But we have a lot of things that are teed up in terms of applications that we're going to deliver. If you think back, 2019 ransomware, we invested a ton in infrastructure and security. I'm not going to say we will never get hit again, but it won't be as bad as it certainly was then. We now have a number of initiatives that really dive into key processes for Baltimore City. We have launched a redesign of all of our web assets, and the redesign doesn't stop there. It really gets into the customer view of how we present information. It will be multi-language, and it'll be designed in a way that the information that people come to our website for, they can get that easily. We're expecting that to go live in Q2 of fiscal year this year. I think that may be maybe saying that wrong. We've implemented a consolidated unifier system for construction project management. That is something where DOT, DGS, and DPW are historically had separate systems. We now have one system that will handle those construction needs. That system will be designed in a way that each business line will be able to have its unique requirements relative to its business, but also have the ability to roll information up so that when we integrate our finances, we can benefit from that. Think about what that means to us. Our ability to take one feed of roughly $888 million of construction costs, fill that into a financial system that will allow us to forecast not only the spend, but the invoicing. That's going to be a huge benefit for us versus how we did it before, having 3 separate feeds at 3 different time frames. We are looking to launch a tax project. That's what we call it, the tax project. That project is imminent, meaning we are negotiating the contract. We're getting ready to go to BOE once we get that, but we have been working hand in hand with finance to kick that project off. My sense is, because I'm sure you're going to ask about what's the timing of us getting it to the BOE. Given the schedule, we are probably 1.5 to 2 months out from a BOE. Once we do that, we have a project that will start being implemented in 2024 and then have further implementations throughout. Tow management, certainly something near and dear to Councilman Dorsey. So another thing that's imminent, it's in procurement right now. We expect that to be about 1.5 months to get through to procurement, unless there are unforeseen issues. When we do that, we are 14 to 16 weeks away from implementation. The key that I'd like to put to the council is that that software that we implement will then allow us to implement the dispatch towing system as well for CAD. And we will have a consolidated platform that we can see all towing activity, our customers can see all towing activity, and offer benefits that will streamline our operations, not only in the CAD space, but also in towing management. Permits, another major system transformation that we are working in partnership with HCD. That system, we are in the negotiating process of price. We expect that to go to the BOE either mid-July to mid-August. At that point in time, we will be 14 months away from an implementation for permits. We have to be very careful as we move forward with these systems to architect them correctly. By that, I mean making sure that, for instance, our tax system coincides with our permitting system, and that we manage our parcels appropriately, and making sure that the integrations between those systems, work correctly. So a lot of work is pending, and a lot of work is coming down the pipe, and I'm sure you all will have a number of questions about it later. 311 call center. So the other day when I was here and I heard the 311 system mentioned at the CAO's hearing, I wanted to just jump in. I did, but I was sitting in the gallery, so I couldn't. I'm going to tell you, we recognize that what the 311 call center does versus the overarching 311 process. But we've looked at this in a way, because we've got that unique view of IT and 311, how do we fix it? And I think it was Councilman Cohen said, can you get in there and just figure it out? Well, I'm here to tell you, we're doing that. And I'm going to pass it off to Lisa. She's going to talk about what we're doing for close equals closed, both on the sort of the programmatic side or the business process side, as well as what we're doing in terms of looking into how do we rearrange the interfaces between our systems. Lisa?
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well. So as Todd mentioned, 311 is just part of the customer experience process. But because we do have a bird's eye view of not only customer service, but service delivery, we are doing a couple things to make sure that we're trying to enhance the customer experience. And one of those is surrounding what we've all known as closed means closed. Please don't close a service request until it is done. Now, we've all heard that forever. So now what we're doing is we're working with the agencies, and we are mapping out what they would pick as an outcome to what they did, which is more detailed than just saying closed. What Salesforce will do from that outcome is trigger a message that is very detailed to what is being done. For example, people that ask that bulk trash be picked up, but they forget to put it outside their gate. Instead of going down the alley and saying, well, we couldn't do that, so the agency will close it, we now will have an outcome that will trigger a message from Salesforce that says, we could not do that because your gate was locked. So we are making very good strides in working with the agencies to make detailed messages to go with those outcomes, to push those messages to customers as it pertains to what was done on their service request. We expect that the project will be totally finished because, you know, we have over 400 service requests that we're looking at that are public facing by the second quarter of '24. The next thing we're working on is implementing a chat bot. So we all know that we want to chat, so we're going to start chatting. Customers will be able to put in a service request through the chat bot, get a lot of information that they would just call 311 about. What time is the library closed? Where is the library? Anything that we have gathered that customers are asking us, and they'll just be able to get a very quick answer. We are working very diligently to get that completed by the first quarter of '24. The next thing that we've been talking about a lot is we've worked with our vendor, and we have established a platform that will make the web and mobile app multi-language. The chatbot will come on actually right away as multi-language, but we are in the process of working with them to translate the first phase of the most popular, 20 most popular service requests that we will be able to offer in Spanish on the web and the mobile app. So we're always looking to enhance the customer engagement and work with our partners in the agency to help put forth a full circle of customer service. I mean, we can answer the phone, we can be polite, we can follow up, but we must partner with our agencies to make sure they're giving us and feeding us the right information to make sure that we're giving the customer a good and consistent message. So we're really excited about that. We will continue to provide the best customer service ever to visitors and citizens of Baltimore.
Thank you, Lisa. So enterprise IT delivery services, this is really the infrastructure piece and the security piece of BCIT. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of work has been done to bring a redundancy, streamline our tool sets, just bring our infrastructure from I would say the 1990s to the 2020s. We've had to implement a number of policies. We just recently did an acceptable use policy revision, but this is really where we've had a lot of success and where cost optimization brings infrastructure people that historically have been in agencies doing infrastructure-related stuff, changing servers, maybe patching, maybe not patching. They would do that stuff in an inconsistent manner, which is a risk to us as a city. This is the group that combines all that together. In addition to that, because we are in a hybrid meeting state, we have secured ARPA funding to implement across Baltimore City the technology that's similar to what we're using here today and that we use in the BOE, in addition to making sure that employees who are teleworking on a consistent basis, they don't have to use their own equipment. They should be using Baltimore City secured equipment that has Baltimore data and do that consistently. So we have a lot of things that are happening. Those are just some of the highlights that you'll be hearing about in terms of being able to work in many different locations in a hybrid manner, but also relief to employees who are using their own computers, fighting their kids, trying to get computer time. This will help them out a lot with that. And if at any point any members of the council would like a briefing on the infrastructure, confidential briefing, we gladly open that up to you. It's a lot of techie stuff, but you would be impressed what has occurred over the last several years. So we picked up the Broadband and Digital Equity Program back in August, September. And we've established or reestablished a number of partners within the philanthropic organizations, as well as partnerships with HABC, Rexham Park, and many other agencies throughout Baltimore City. The MORP office, we work hand in hand with them. And so what we've done, and I'm going to ask Kenya to talk about this, is, hit the reset button, and while you may not see the progress that you would have expected, I can tell you that it is teed up and ready to go. There's a lot of work that's happening. And you can tell when a lot of work is happening because, you get to questions and issues because people are digging into the details. They're finding things out. Just the other day when we talked about, for instance, the public hotspots that would go into, I think we're looking at Pennsylvania Avenue. We have to do structural analysis on the poles before we can put a wireless AP, we call them, access point on that pole. Didn't know that we had to do that, or if we affix it to a building. We're also finding out different ways of how to approach HABC public housing. We've built what we call our own network just for this traffic so it doesn't interfere with the day-to-day work of Baltimore City. We had to build that out. And we had to find that we needed more redundancy to make sure that if something went down, you had failover. So we've done a lot of things to make sure that this is working and will work. And I'm going to turn it over to Director Osley, who's behind me. You probably can't see her. And she's done a great job staffing up her team, getting them ready to deliver on this key mayoral goal. Kenya?
So, July of last year, the transition from the mayor's office to BCIT occurred, and let me just let you know, we've been a little busy, just a little busy. And we have continued to focus on the infrastructure projects, and Todd has mentioned a few of them. He's going to go through them briefly, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the programs, the community-facing work that we've done since July. So to Todd's point, number one, we are pulling fiber to all of our rec centers. The idea here is that every resident should be able to walk into a recreation center, have access to a device, have access to the network, and have access to training. So we are working with Rexham Parks and Enoch Pratt to ensure that the programming is in place in terms of our infrastructure. We're pulling fiber to all of the city's rec centers that are not currently on the city's fiber network. There are about 21 of those. To date, we have completed 10 of the fiber pulls, with the other 21 scheduled for this year. In addition to our work in rec centers, we got an additional grant from HRSA to provide services to some of our senior centers. All of the Baltimore City Health Department senior centers that are currently on our network will also take advantage of training and devices for their seniors. There are about 6 nonprofit senior centers that are not on our network that we are moving to our network to ensure that those locations have consistent access to our network. For our senior centers, we anticipate we will go live by June of next year. And to be clear, our infrastructure projects, we are running them concurrently. So we have a team working on our Wi-Fi and a team working on the senior centers and rec centers. For our public Wi-Fi, there are two approaches. One is to ensure that our recreation centers are also provide outdoor Wi-Fi. So in addition to the indoor Wi-Fi, obviously, we'll have outdoor Wi-Fi at all of our recreation centers. In addition, we are now in a design and planning phase for the outdoor Wi-Fi. Our first neighborhood will be Pennsylvania and North. We are, to Todd's point, we are currently testing the area to see what it can absorb. We anticipate our design and planning phase will be complete by October, and we should be able to deploy by spring of next year. Those are all of our infrastructure projects. In terms of the community-facing programs that we're running, first is the Affordable Connectivity Program. Thus far, there are about 12,000 Baltimore City residents, Baltimore City households that qualify for ACP that are not already signed up for ACP. So we have partnered with 20 or more nonprofits to increase awareness. So you will begin to see ACP information on billboards, on buses, on bus shelters, to encourage folks to sign up for the Affordable Connectivity Program. And if you don't already know, the ACP, it is a program that provides income-eligible households with $30 per month toward their internet bill. And Maryland, one of the few states in the country, also provides an additional $15 per month for income-eligible households. We recently applied for and received a grant from the state for 30,000 Chromebooks, which we are going to deploy starting in July. We're waiting for this state to deliver those. These Chromebooks, again, income-eligible households, and the eligibility is identical to the ACP. We already have about 15 nonprofits that we're partnering with. Our primary partner is Enoch Pratt. They will be our deployment partner. But we're doing events in neighborhoods so that you can sign up for the ACP and also get a device. We set aside 3.25 of our ARPA funds to establish the Digital Equity Fund, which provides small grants to nonprofits that are planning, implementing programs that will help address the digital divide. We anticipate our first grants will be awarded in June. Stay tuned for the invitation. But our first grants will be deployed in June, and we anticipate 10 to 15 grants in the first cycle. We recognize that as we are providing all of this programming to our residents, a few of our employees are also in need of some support. So we have the Employee Digital Skills Training. We partnered with DHR to create a training program for employees that are not required to use computers to complete their daily tasks. This is a different group of employees. We are starting with DPW, and that program will launch, the pilot will launch in July of this year. Part of that HRSA grant, I mentioned the services to seniors. We are also partnering with Enoch Pratt, the Health Department, and UMS, University of Maryland Medical Systems, to establish 4 telehealth pilot programs, 2 in senior centers and 2 in libraries. We anticipate those 4 locations will go live in September of this year. That is all of my programs.
We also recognize and put out there, these chairs are uncomfortable. We also certainly will put out there if council members want a more detailed briefing on what we're doing in the broadband and digital equity space, we'll be more than happy to do that. I do believe there's a upcoming council hearing on broadband. That certainly can suffice, but we offer, you know, more detailed briefings if necessary. So that concludes the presentation. We really appreciate the time that you've allotted for us, and we know you have a number of questions. As I said before, we were looking forward to this hearing because we feel we have a good story to tell. We're not perfect, not saying that. I know Councilman Dorsey is going to ask me a couple of questions about some of the parking enforcement work. I can answer those, but at the end of the day, we're here to serve, and our team is committed to doing just that. So with that, I'll turn it over to
Thank you,
Councilor
Director.
Schleifer.
Thank you, Director Carter. First off, I just want to say, when we got started here a few years ago, BCIT was in complete disarray, and you came in here and told us exactly what you were going to do, and you did it. And so we thank you for that. The agency looks nothing like it looked like before, and so you really built it out from the inside, and I appreciate that. I see the intricacies of what you've been doing, and so I appreciate that, and I'm glad to see that you guys are taking on more responsibilities and taking things from other agencies, because every time I've seen something get transferred under BCIT, under your leadership, it has been vastly different and far improved from the way it was under other agencies, and so I just want to thank you for that. I don't have any questions because every time I have a question and I call you, you answer the question, and so there's no reason for me to ask you anything today. Does anybody have any questions? Councilman Conway?
Thank you. And I'll echo those sentiments. Appreciate the work that you guys do. I know there's a lot coming through your office, and so you guys are always juggling a ton, but even more, you handle it with grace. I want to ask a couple of questions, first starting out with the transfer of the Office of Broadband and Digital Equity. Noting that that's been transferred over to BCIT, they're going to be managing a ton of grants and grant funds. Do you guys have the capacity to manage grant funds? Or do you need additional capacity or staff to manage that funding, grant reporting, so on and so forth? How's that been thought through?
Yes, can you?
Currently, we are partnered with the Baltimore Civic Fund to manage all of our grants. We have brought in, so that when we started out, when BDE started out in BCIT back in July, there was 2 employees, and now we are up to 5, well, 8 if you include our 3 fellows. And we are, again, supported by multiple teams, many of which are sitting in this room now, but multiple teams on the tech side. So to answer your question, for now, our grant program is, for the most part, managed by BCF.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. And depending on how much more grant funding we get into the office, I think we might want to continue to keep that question in the back of our minds, noting that we don't want to be in a position where we have to give money back or pay money back because we didn't use grant funding appropriately, and we've been in that situation as a city before, and we certainly never want to be there again, so just as a matter of safety. The other question I had goes back to closed means closed, and this is an issue that goes way, 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 way back. So, you know, I think in my personal interaction with the issue, there are a number of reasons why we end up here. I appreciate you guys are working on it. Lisa, you know, we go way back, so I appreciate the complexity of the issue and some of the solutions that you put forward. I would love to have some of those components in writing. So I want to make that an official request for the committee, just so that we know the actions that we're taking and that we can just keep you guys to that. One of the other things that has been a challenge, and I think this is uniquely IT focused, has been the communication between 301 and other systems, most notably
I'm sorry?
and other systems.
Okay.
CityWorks is a great example, and a number of others. SRs will come in come into 301, and then they are transferred to agencies. Agencies send them to their own work order management system, and things go haywire from there. That's one of the reasons why we do have closed means closed issues. I know one of the things we've been working on was to have, for instance, forestry notes show up in 301, and we noticed that hasn't changed yet. Any sense of when that may begin to happen, or anywhere we?
I didn't hear the last part. What into 311?
So when forestry complaints come in,
Okay, forestry, okay.
and they're transferred over to Rec and Parks system, I'm not even sure what it is. The notes from follow-up from those service requests are not quite showing up in 301, so that when we go into the system and we're trying to figure out whether or not the issue has been resolved or why it has not been resolved, we can't see that. Any idea what's going on there? And
So let me take the first part of your question, which is, and I'll get a little techie regarding the transfer of data between 311 or Salesforce and other systems, specifically CityWorks. Our teams are literally redoing that integration. Think about it as pulling the guts out and putting new guts in to make sure that everything is in sync, and then giving us the management tools to be able to see those instances where people are not adhering to the practices that they should be adhering to. So we are building that as we speak today, and so from that standpoint, CityWorks in particular will have that unified flow to and from 311. With respect to forestry into 311, I'll ask Lisa to opine on that. Lisa?
Sure. Forestry also has transitioned to putting their work into an integrator to CityWorks. And CityWorks is part of the process that Todd just talked about. So we are making great strides in working with CityWorks and other integrators to make sure that those messages are going to flow from CityWorks to Salesforce, and Salesforce can push out that message. And that is why also our schedule is out to the second quarter of 24. So the messaging is one part that we're doing, and the other part is working with those integrators to make sure that that information is matched. So that's a big thing.
so I guess maybe to tweak the request for the committee, if we have timelines to some of those upgrades or changes that we're making to the system, that'd be helpful, just for our own edification.
Okay.
We can provide that, no problem at all.
And sort of additional sort of question related to the group. Do we at all issue surveys anymore?
For 311?
Yes.
Absolutely. Lisa?
Yes, we do have surveys. They go out provided, and we always have to tell, and you all help me out to make sure everybody gives us their email address, because we need your email address. And that sometimes is a challenge. But when we have just re-implemented and reintroduced a few months ago with the Office of Performance and Innovation, OPI, putting surveys out for every closed service request that we have a email address for. So they manage the survey results and take action where it's appropriate to do that. So those automatically go out when the close button is hit.
That's excellent. And is that captured within 301, or is that
It's captured, I believe that it's captured in 311, but it's transferred into a system. I believe they're using something as simple as SurveyMonkey just to, get all the information in the right place and be able to correlate it together.
Great. And then last piece to that effect, we were talking a little bit about how agencies use 311 and how they interact with 311. Do we have a process by which we randomly audit or check at all? Maybe it's from the data we're seeing from surveys or otherwise, but we check how agencies are using 311 and making sure that they're using it correctly?
If you're talking in terms of making sure that the process is being followed in terms of
Yeah.
how, so Salesforce can do what we wanted to do.
Yep.
We do provide a lot of training around that, and we're providing a lot more now since we're working with the integrators. It's going to have to be consistent, and the process is going to have to be done correctly by everyone for it to work 100%. So in terms of training, we do that. In terms of if you're talking about auditing service requests, 311 doesn't do that. We do provide the 311 statistical report for agencies, and they can take those reports and they can audit their work.
So if we were seeing, for instance, issues coming back in our surveys, noting that things were closed that should not have been closed, or that they should have been, notes should have been put in and they weren't put in, or something like that, how are we currently notifying agencies that they should be changing their processes?
Well, if we have a customer, for example, that calls back and says the conditions still exist and or something's going on, we still do have that escalation service request that belongs to 311, and it allows us to directly communicate with the agency on a specific service request. We, again, don't get into how the agency handled that or you know, audit around any purposes of that, but we do have a means to let them know that something's gone awry and maybe you can take a look at it.
I appreciate that. Is anyone else looking at it? For instance, I know CityStat used to do it before. Do the agencies look at this data? Does CityStat look at the data? I guess who is the person who's looking
I
at it?
believe that OPI also is the keeper of that data and make sure that things are done and follows up on it.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Ramos? Oh, you're back, Estelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lots of exciting updates. Thank you. On the 311, Ms. Allen, or Director Allen, thank you very much for really working diligently to make sure that it is available multilingual. I just wanted to clarify what you said, though, is that we're going to start off with the top 20 requests that you get citywide, assuming that people who are speaking other languages also want that. And that will be in the app as well as the web?
Well, the app right now, everything's in the app, in the web. You can do everything. I was specifically talking about the chat bot. We'll start off with being able to put service requests in for the first 20 most popular service requests that is taken from data from the whole city.
I just wanted to clarify. Okay,
So the web and that mobile, it'll all be multi-language.
Oh, okay. Okay, so great. So the entire app and the website, all of 400 and whatever it is requests will be available in our top 5 languages, I would imagine. And then the chat box would be available for just the top 20, and those will also be multilingual.
Yes, and we are starting out with Spanish, so I should make that clear as well, which of course is our #1 non-speaking in here, but we will expand to other languages as well.
Yeah, Spanish first then.
Yes,
Okay, yeah,
yes.
great, okay. Well, that's amazing, that's great. And so what's the timeline on that?
The timeline for the chatbot is the first quarter in '24, and the timeline for the mobile and app is the second quarter of '24.
Okay, so we've delayed it again, because I remember a few weeks ago, we had another hearing on language access, and the timeline was end of '23. And now you're saying the second quarter of '24.
Well, it was always I'm getting calendar fiscal, so
Sure.
it is still the end of the year, which would be '24 second quarter.
Okay, I see what you're, sorry, yes.
No, that's okay. That is confusing.
Right. Somebody above me was the one who decided all that. So, okay. So that's great. So we're still on track.
Yes.
And that's going to be super important to have. If you don't mind, let's work together on sort of making a big announcement around that. I think that's super important to be able to have the opportunity to let residents know that they, city services are for everybody and how we're going to do that. So Yaslin's here, so she'll make sure that we're coordinating all of that. So, and with the mayor's office, so very exciting. My second question was around the system director that, and let me just also say that, echo my colleague sentiments about just the leaps and bounds that the department is taking. And again, as, you know, you're taking on more, I think we're very confident that you can do that. You're working on the property tax payment system, and you had said that it'll be implemented in 2024.
It'll be a phase implementation that'll start in 2024. So, you know, the reality, Councilwoman, is that once we get the contract signed, that's when we'll be able to put some really hard dates and hard functionality. So what we currently have now is the beginnings of that contract, but it's just not formally finalized. if that
Right,
makes
so what
sense.
we heard from finance, though, was that the deadline that we had, that legislation that was passed by the city council for the future payment, installment payments, that would still be implemented by '23, by July 1,
That's, yes.
like a few
Yes,
weeks from
that-
now.
That
Yes.
piece, yes, yes.
Right, okay, so that's good, and then we do have legislation that we just introduced that will have
And I
in
think this
arrears.
is something that as we begin to put these systems together, we will have to, once we understand how they're going to be integrated, how they're going to be architected, we may have to ask council to not stop, but maybe delay the implementation of some of the legislation that's being passed to coincide with the delivery of these systems versus us building it once and then in a couple of months having to build it again. So what
I think we're fine with that in the payment plans one, because we're still working on getting full-on tax sale reform, so we're gonna need, so I think we'll work on that.
So that's, you know, we know that commitment is out there. We're aware of the pending legislation. We don't know how this stuff fits together at this point in time, but we are aware of it, and we'll like to work with the council to figure out the best way, the best timing of some of this functionality that we build.
Yeah, I think it would have to integrate with how we're doing tax sale reform, because, you know, there's the payment plans option that will be into that, so I think that makes sense. Does that dovetail with what the third piece that you talked about in terms of the payments and looking at the property, the parcels? Talk a little bit more about that piece again.
Permitting system?
Yeah,
So that's another system that we're partnering with DHCD. We've are at a point, I'm trying to figure out what I can say and cannot say since
there's no announcement made yet.
yeah, announcement has been made. But I think what I can say is it's imminent that we will be bringing something to contract to the BOE soon. And at that point in time, we're projecting a 14-month system. So if we 14-month deployment. So if we say start September, you can picture 14 months from there. And of course, that will need to be integrated to either existing systems or any new systems that we are deploying.
But is that where it would be integrated with CodeMap? So if I go to CodeMap and I'm looking for the taxes that are on a property, I can't see that right now. I have to go to this other system to see that. Is that what you're saying? Is that what's being integrated?
I would say CodeMap as well as other HCD systems, we would, you know, there are many other systems,
Yes.
including that we would have to, that's part of the design process that we would need to do.
Sure.
Once we select the vendor.
It would be so amazing to just go to one place. Now I have to check 3 different places to see who's in tax sale, how much is on.
We agree.
Sometimes I have to ask, you know, Mr. Scrivener, like, that would be great to just get all of that. So that's wonderful. I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, you can't say much more than that on this piece. So that's really amazing. Mr. Chair, I have a couple other questions, but I can yield to the next council member.
I guess I'm chair, and I just wanted to make one comment, then I have to step out. CIO Carter, I want to thank you. You've done an incredible job since you've come here. Team has been fantastic. You have greatly strengthened our IT security posture. Appreciate Layla, Art, Miss Allen, of course, and especially Chris Austin, who was a blessing to all of us on the 5th floor, and my man Kish, who always helps me out when I have an issue and I'm remote. So really appreciate all the team's hard work. Keep up the great work. And with that, I'll give it back to Chairman Schleifer, I guess to Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you. BCIT is always there for us. I don't want to disappoint. I'm only here to reciprocate. When you say Councilman Dorsey has to ask you about parking enforcement, Councilman Dorsey asks you about parking enforcement.
Well, first, let me just say I certainly appreciate all the compliments, but it is truly a team effort, and I just want to put that out there. I actually have the schedule for parking enforcement.
Yeah.
I knew, and I certainly can give it to you. It's something that Councilman Dorsey brought to me, and he did a very thorough analysis of some challenges in parking enforcement, and we pulled a team together from DOT, 311, our project management group, and they put together a plan that literally will bring, and I forgot what the devices are called. Lisa, what are they called?
It's a worker app. It
It
doesn't have a name yet.
Pretty much, it's an app on Salesforce that will allow the seamless transmission of orders from Salesforce or service requests from Salesforce directly to those parking enforcement representatives, and they can input that information, do whatever the parking enforcement functions are, and it goes directly back to Salesforce when completed. It will allow the upload and download of pictures. It hasn't been a quick delivery, I'm sure, as you know, but it is a planned, methodical delivery given all of the work that everyone is working on currently.
For reference, for folks who don't know what's going on here, DPW is dispatching parking enforcement to DOT agents, and sometimes there is a 1 or 2 hour delay, and sometimes there's a 9 or for parking enforcement. Sometimes there's a 1 hour or 2 hour delay. Sometimes there's a 9 or 13 hour delay in the time between when a citizen puts in a parking enforcement request in the Salesforce app, in the 311 app, and then because they're being dispatched out over the radio, never ever are those parking enforcement agents ever seeing the photographs that I put into the 311 app to show them where it is, and they're getting often churned location data that is inaccurate, and so they go to the wrong site and say, I didn't find it there. So it's really bad situation that this is gonna fix in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so it's targeted toward the fourth quarter calendar year 23, make sure I get the right calendar year 23. And the team has done process analysis, data analysis. It's a work in process, but it is something that is not as moving as fast as I think you would like, Councilman, but it's also done in partnership with DOT and the workload that they have and the resources that we have, but it is something that we are looking to have completed during that time frame.
If I could get a copy of that schedule for the time frame, and then also if we could do a follow-up, I'd like to hear from
Sure.
BCIT and DOT together what this has turned into.
Sure, no
I
problem
haven't
at all.
had an update.
No problem at all.
Thank you. Just thanks for being dedicated to that and also to the towing dispatch stuff. I want to follow up on that and know where we are with that. Regarding just SR types, I had this odd experience a couple months ago where I wanted to put in a report about a business that was continuing to provide prohibited plastic bags, and learned that when I couldn't find it on the app, it was a service request type that existed only via phone, and that there was a specific decision made when it was created not to make it available via the app. So what I'd like to know is a cross-reference kind of map of what service request types exist on the various platforms and whether they do or do not exist on all platforms. It doesn't really make any sense to me that we should just be letting agencies decide what to make convenient to report one way versus inconvenient the other way. were it possible.
So, Councilman Dorsey, that was something you brought to my attention, which was very interesting. But what happens is when service requests are created, we work with the agency, and one of the questions is, where do you want to put this service request? We don't dictate you have to put it on the app or you have to put it on the web. It always has to be available by call, by 311, but that's what happened. When it was first created long ago, it was just decided by the agency not to put it on the web. We talked through your concerns, and I worked with health, and as you know, it's on the web now. But that is an agency decision.
Yeah, like I said, I just think it's real weird that that's an agency decision. I don't think it should be an agency decision. The 311 system seems like it should be equally accessible via all of the available platforms for all service request types. So is it possible to produce just a list of all the different service request types and be able to show which platform they are or are not available on?
Yes.
We can do that,
Yes.
and we can certainly look at that general concern. I too agree there shouldn't be a discrepancy, or at least if there is, there should be a real compelling reason as to why it is. But we can give the crosswalk,
Yeah.
as well as look into what is inhibiting some being on one platform versus another. We can look at that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm excited about the digital equity initiative. Obviously there were no performance metrics in the book because you haven't started. But I guess what does success look like, and what are some of the performance indicators that you all are, I guess, internally kicking the tires on to measure the impact of this work beyond sort of the obvious of allowing more people to be able to get on the internet, but I guess what are the bigger goals here with this program?
So you're right. The performance measures are not, the ones that are published, not the best fit. So for instance, the number of households that can access the Wi-Fi network, Wi-Fi networks aren't designed to penetrate the home. This is outdoor connectivity. So for us, the performance measures include the number of residents that have, number of households that have devices, the number of households that have access to training, the number of households that have signed up for the ACP and other supports. We recognize that to address the digital divide, it's devices, training, and connectivity. So all of our performance measures will measure, again, the ability for our residents to be connected to the internet in their homes and for our public Wi-Fi while they are on the bus stops, while they are at public markets, while they are in the Main Street districts, for instance. And again, we have about 30,000 Chromebooks to distribute, so it's how many households have received a device, how many devices exist in the household. These are indicators, actually nationwide indicators, that help speak to whether or not your community is adopting the internet.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I was wondering about that. And again, I'm just excited to see that come to fruition. I know it's something we've been talking about for a few years now, so it's almost here. Oh, sorry. Second question, there was a part two for that. You mentioned, I think it was mentioned in the beginning of the conversation about the infrastructure build out. Can you remind me again what the timeline is for that?
For relative to the broadband digital equity or in general?
Yeah, the broadband digital equity piece.
So that consists of, like for instance, we have to build a separate network. And we have a very huge pipe that can push a lot of data, and we had to build redundancy to that pipe just in case it goes down. But it includes the servers, routers, storage, and other type of equipment in addition to the things that'll connect to the actual fiber pools. So it's a lot of hardware, I would say, that has to be deployed for the quote-unquote infrastructure for BDE. And that hardware is from, throughout the entire set of places where we deploy whether it's a public hotspot, public housing, rec center, senior center, all that needs a series of hardware to get that service to residents.
Okay.
Did that help?
Yeah, so it sounds like a multi-year timeline, it sounds like.
Well, the short answer to that, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of work that's been done relative to the scope that we're working on now that really puts us, still multi-year, but you'll start to see more and more of what Kenya mentioned being deployed in terms of rec centers, senior centers, and then we'll work with HABC for the actual public housing.
Okay, thank you. There was a note on Service 805, page 146. It says that the hiring of a manager of incident and problem management will improve current processes used to handle critical priority tickets within 4 hours or less. What are some of the changes that are going to be implemented to hit that window?
Well, that's a critical role because, for any IT shop, you have to kind of, when something occurs, you say, what changed? And you kind of drill down into the problem-solving method, but you need a very structured and rigorous process to get to root causes so that you can avoid having the same issue occur again. So as an example, if I'm trying to think of a more recent example, here's a good example. Yesterday, the first day was the hearings was yesterday, right? Yes. Okay, so yesterday, we had a critical incident acknowledgement that came over, to everyone, but it came to us first. It was that we were having connectivity problems in City Hall.
Oh, on the 5th floor, yeah, I saw that.
So you can imagine, all of our alarms went up. We take our critical incidents manager, he and his team immediately go to it in a very defined and structured way, and then we get information out that, oh, this wasn't all of City Hall, because I'm saying, man, I have to go to a hearing, these guys are gonna kill me. But it was 5th floor and only half of the 5th floor. And then the problem ended up being a switch needed to be replaced. So the methodical method or methodical way to figure out where the problem is, what the problem is, what's the root cause, let me fix it, not only applies to hardware, but also software, sometimes even business processes that we have. So that manager is a critical role that helps us build discipline within our teams, build a learning organization that learns from mistakes, allows us to have metrics. We have a very, very talented individual that does that. Okay. I'm speaking right now, and I'm kind of freaking out a little bit because my microphone, the bar is red, so I don't know what that means. So maybe I'm talking too much or something. I don't know.
No, you're fine. I think we can switch them out. It should be fine. Okay. My last questions were really just one remaining question because I think you covered the other one already. What is and I get this question a lot, and I don't know if this should be directed to you or the police department, but what is the current cost of a single City Watch camera? Like from not only just the camera, but obviously there's infrastructure that needs to be built out for said camera.
Let me introduce you to my friend.
Okay.
Mr.
All right.
Mr. Art Ray, he can tell you all about that.
So in general, just the camera itself is installed is under $4,000. What drives the cost is the construction. If we were to install fiber and things like that, if there were nothing relatively close to where that camera is designated, the construction costs are very expensive. Sometimes, for a few hundred yards, conduit, tearing up, a sidewalk or a street or any of those kind of things, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars, unfortunately. So it's not just the camera, it's the construction, it's the fiber, it's all of those infrastructure costs. And of course, you may have to have an infrastructure, a switch, if you will, to transmit that video data back through the network.
And just a quick follow-up. I had an opportunity, this was a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago now, I had an opportunity to go to the City Watch Center, or their equivalent, it wasn't called City Watch, in New Orleans. When our police commissioner just came, he was coming from New Orleans. I happened to be in New Orleans, and he's like, "Oh, I want you to see this thing." Went to check it out, and it was interesting. It was very much their system's newer and very recent. I think they just started on Bourbon Street and have been building out. But one of the things that they have been doing as a cost savings is literally like digitally printing their cameras. Is that something in-house? So they took me to the shop, and they have all the parts and printers, and it gives them a lot more flexibility because they can move the cameras around. They're not necessarily fixed to a specific location. Now, I don't understand the tech. You guys are the folks that understand that a little bit better and what that would look like here, or if it could look like here. But it was a way that they are able to deploy both from traffic enforcement and other sort of needs, emergency situations where they can literally move cameras around based on need, based on, if there's an influx of violence or an area that in a particular part of the city, they can deploy cameras as needed and then take them out as needed. And so just was thinking, like, what would it take to do something like that? And it seemed like it would be cheaper. I don't know that it is necessarily, but just thought, that was a very interesting, and I'm sure he could expound on it or build relations, could make a connection there if that was something that you all thought could save the city some money and give us some flexibility.
Well, I would definitely be interested in something like that. And are you speaking of something that's more mobile, like a?
Yeah, I didn't get the impression that they were. I mean, I think they affixed them to poles and stuff. It didn't seem like it was like a structure that'd be like sitting, on the sidewalk.
Okay.
But I also don't think that they're running like hard, infrastructure, fiber to each of these locations. I don't think that would even make sense. Or I don't know. There's obviously more questions to be asked.
Yeah,
that I wasn't asking the right ones. But either way, I was like, this seems like a good way to save money if you literally have 2 or 3 staffers that
Yeah, I
are
would
3D
definitely
printing
be
cameras instead of like working with a vendor to bring in new ones. So I'm happy to make the connection with the commissioner. We can talk offline to talk about that in New Orleans. Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Use your microphone.
We have connections all throughout BPD. Art works with them on a daily basis,
Right.
so we can search that out for you.
Yep.
Certainly will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have 2 other questions. One is, I've started the discussion with a couple of the agencies around trying to make sure that we have simultaneous translation services at public meetings. So we had our first simultaneous translation service hearing with simultaneous translation, and the way that we did it was the people who needed Spanish speaking, we had a Zoom link. People who needed Spanish speaking got their headphones and logged into the Zoom, and we had the translator up in my office, because the acoustics here are bad, to translate as we were having the hearing. And then we had another translator to speak English to us when that person was speaking Spanish, which worked out fine. And but I think what we want to do is to figure out, and Hosea has put money in the budget for the council to continue to think about how that would work for our hearings. Okay. We need to do that for every agency, right? We need to be able to make sure that public meetings are not just for English speakers. The fire department let us know yesterday that they are starting to think about using AI for when somebody calls 911, that when they call, they can speak in Spanish, but the person at 911 can speak English, but it would translate automatically. Super crazy. So I'm wondering if we can at least put on your radar to think through how we can, whether it's AI, whether it's simultaneous translation the way we did it. I'm also, encouraging all of the agencies to hire people who speak Spanish, and translating shouldn't be their only, job, but certainly part of it. But we've got to figure out a way to have public meetings available for everybody. And we're under obligation to do that with the ADA. You'd think that that would be something that we should be doing for all languages. So just to put that on your radar as something to think about. working with MEMA, working with others to make sure that, like, and there may be a technology solution, which is why I bring it to you. I don't know. So we've just got to try to figure that out, and also include it as an expense, because I don't think, and the city administrator's not here, and maybe you can let us know, Mara or Ms. James, in terms of, you know, the money now allocated to each agency to be able to have translation services. That is a request I made a few months back, so I don't know, and maybe we talk about it during the MEMA session, but I don't know if that's something that you have already allocated. Every agency gets a little allocation for translation services?
I don't have details on that right now, but I can follow up for MEMA and have that ready for that hearing.
Okay,
as
so
well.
we'll have that for whenever we have MEMA. That will be
I'll
fine.
prepare to have that.
Okay, all
information
right.
for you.
And then, so anyway, putting that on your
So
radar.
Councilman Ramos, appreciate the request. We actually have a service called Gartner that is designed specifically for the research that we need. So we will pose that to them. They have it's a international service across the world that specifically they are advisors to us. So that will be something that we can give to them and figure out what's out there, what are other people doing, and they package that in a way that we should be able to get something back to you one way or the other fairly quickly as to what's out there, and then we can figure out how do we move forward, and, you know, like, what does it cost, you know, what's the support cost, you know, we can figure this out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, it's in-person meetings as well as virtual
I understand.
meetings, so it's, okay. Great, because we're going to try to figure it out here, and certainly could use your help, but I think, you know, each of the agencies. So great, it's on your radar. The second piece, I just wanted to make sure that it is known to all that Director Asley has been named Queen, Digital Equity Queen. Remember, we did this the other day? So that is how we will acknowledge you, but I have a question, Queen. What about the fact that one of the visions around the digital equity work is twofold. One is obviously access for everyone, but it's also, so what I heard in your presentation, I guess maybe it's phase one, is really about the people coming to a place to get access. What I thought the vision is for people to be able to do it in their homes. So we have the last mile question in terms of how are we going to get, you know, fiber or whatever it is to people's homes that's in an affordable way. And then in addition to that, does that then translate to having our own broadband, municipal broadband system where where there's competition with Comcast because it is our own system?
So let me start. Thank you. There is something I neglected to highlight in my opening, which was our work with HABC. So we are pulling fiber to 8 HABC locations to provide fiber to each unit. In July of this year, we anticipate releasing an RFP to invite ISPs to compete to provide services to public housing residents. So our plan, so I want to paint a little bit of a picture for you, if you will. Our plan is to pull fiber to every neighborhood in Baltimore City. And the way that we're doing that primarily is with our rec centers and senior centers play. In addition, again, we are also able to pull fiber to neighborhoods through our relationship or our new project with HABC. Once we have the infrastructure that we will own, then our plan again is to let the market tell us what the city can manage, what the next steps would be. Now, I understand that the promise or the expectation is that we would have connection, Baltimore City infrastructure would be in every single household. We haven't ruled that out, but we're trying to figure out what's the best option for Baltimore City. So the first step is to make sure that we have the infrastructure all over the city. So where we would serve as that middle mile provider. And then, based on what we learn in our RFP, second RFP process, is to then come up with a plan for how do we get the connection to households beyond the HABC locations.
So if I understand correctly, we're starting where the need is most.
Yeah.
Which is exactly where we should be doing. That's exactly right. Looking at the rec centers, libraries, and the and HABC areas where we can pull fiber there so that people can access from those points, and then looking at how we can then branch out to get that last mile, whether it's through competition in the market or creating our own, and you're still working on that.
Yes.
And I'm thankful that you're starting where we need it most, and then possibly over time can branch out from there. So that's great. So that's how is that right? Okay.
Absolutely. It's like
Okay.
you work at BCIT.
You don't want me there.
Queen to queen.
Thank you. No, that's great. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that that's what we were all on the same page on that piece. Because we do get constituents going, oh, Comcast, but one thing at a time. Let's make sure that people who don't have access immediately, and then move forward. So
Yes.
that's great. Mhm.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Director, did you, how much money did you guys get from ARPA funds?
Is that including BDE as well as any other?
Just
allocation?
straight up BCIT,
Yep, so
like
that
for
was,
this, for stuff you guys are working on?
yep, $35 million allocation for BDE. And then there was an additional allocation of roughly $5 million for some of the other hardware improvements as
I'm
well.
sorry, what was the first thing, the 35 for?
The $35 million was for broadband and digital equity.
Oh, okay. But I'm saying for actual projects for BCIT, for some of the stuff that you guys are building out to improve your infrastructure to perform the functions that you're performing for the city, how much money has gone to that?
Yeah, so Chris had mentioned the $5 million. We got $10 million that wasn't ARPA for projects. And some of the, for instance, the permitting system is an ARPA project. So it's not directed toward BCIT, but it's directed toward HCD. So there's, money has been put in different buckets for IT work, not all in BCIT's bucket, but in other buckets that we are using.
Gotcha. So for existing stuff that you guys are working on and existing improvements, infrastructure improvements, not talking about like new projects that you're doing externally, is there anything that has been allocated to that?
I'm not quite.
So within the within your plans of projects you're building out to secure our systems, to create these bridges between agencies, and just the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis for the city,
Okay.
prior to the pandemic, did you get any ARPA money towards some of those things that you guys wanted to do?
Yeah, so we use capital dollars for those types of projects. We got an allocation of ARPA in addition to the BDE money that we mentioned for the additional city-watch cameras, for hybrid meetings, for laptops, for hybrid workers. And so, but we've also got additional money from the administration to do additional work. And we use those funds with addition to the capital funds we use, or we have to do projects that we mentioned today through our readout.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And then my last question, you're talking about the Wi-Fi, the public Wi-Fi and everything like that, and you kept mentioning that it's going to be done based on out of the rec centers. And so being that my district is the only district in the entire city that's a rec desert and has no rec center, and there's no plans for any rec center in my district. Is there a way maybe we can get some of that public Wi-Fi just out in the public?
So our public Wi-Fi deployment, there are two strategies. One is because we're already pulling fiber to recreation centers, we will ensure that all recreation centers also emit a Wi-Fi signal externally. In addition to that, we are working with our internal teams we have a pilot that we're starting in West Baltimore, first and foremost, along Pennsylvania avenues. This is outdoor. We are identifying additional locations across the city. I will tell you that we are focused primarily in those areas that have low digital equity. And there is a resource that we're using out of the University of Baltimore. They have an amazing data map. We're adding additional data points to that map to help guide the deployment for our outdoor Wi-Fi. So yes, it is possible, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I have a neighborhood in my district. It's the most diverse neighborhood. It's the northwest corner of the city. It's called Falstaff. And so if you can look into that to see how to do that, there's a lot of, there certainly is a tremendous need for it in that community. We have a couple of public schools right there that already have fiber that you can pull from. So if you can just look into that, I appreciate it.
I will add, sir, if you don't mind, that Rexham Parks, they are also working with us. We're looking at Wi-Fi in public parks as well. So where you may have open green space, that's another opportunity.
Yeah, that's another sore subject.
Oops.
We don't, Rec and Parks doesn't like to come up that far up 83, so that's a separate point, but we can discuss that location. Does anybody else have any other questions? Councilman Conway?
Just one more quick one. I was thinking a little more about the closed means closed issue and particularly how we can stay on top of that going forward. And I was thinking, I was looking through the performance measures for the 311 call center, and it's not captured there. I'm not sure if it should be captured there. I think it could be captured there. But then I think there's also a question of whether or not each agency should have a sense of their own on whether or not these surveys are reflecting whether or not their service requests are actually being closed. So I think that's a question or a consideration for finance. And just thinking about, we know that the closed means closed issue is something it sort of permeates every agency in the city that has forward-facing 301 requests. If we might want to consider either putting that under this service, noting that they don't have direct control over it, although they have a huge relationship with the issue, or considering maybe looking at the forward-facing agencies.
Yeah, we do track that information in our executive summary. Under each pillar, there are citywide indicators, and the indicator for responsible stewardship of city resources, one of those is average time to close for 311 service requests. Of course, it does run into a similar concern that we've been discussing around what does closed mean and how does that align. But I will say that we have that data historically, and so as we're going through, I would imagine, this process with OPI around the agency performance plans, we can bring this up as well at different levels.
I want to be very pointed. It's a little bit different from what I think we currently capture, and maybe I need to check that first, but I'm specifically talking about making sure that when people call 311 that the issue that they called about is resolved, not necessarily that the issue is closed.
And that's what I'm saying. I think it's not necessarily meeting what you're saying, but this is how we measure it now. We can look at that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking because we know now that OPI is tracking, or at least they're issuing surveys, and I actually don't know if they're putting this in the survey, and that's something for them to think about, whether or not the issue is actually resolved, I think would be a great indicator of whether or not the problems are actually resolved. So there's a pothole, 301 goes out, someone fills the pothole, turns out it's not a pothole, it's a sinkhole, and it's a whole big issue. DOT closes it out, it now goes to water and wastewater. We know this is an issue. And so it's technically not closed. And so the person may say, look, my issue is not resolved. There's now a massive sinkhole that got worse over time. And what I want for us to do is figure out how we differentiate closed from resolved problem. And I think surveys, which OPI is now doing, can help us regularly identify that as an issue. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? Nope. All right, so I see on our calendar here, it has BCIT, Broadband, Digital Equity, and Chief Data Officer. Did you guys, I know that we kind of combined it, everything. Was there any other presentation that you had that you wanted to present?
We did not have any other presentation. We had the Justin for the digital services team. I think it's part of the line that you just read, Councilman.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
There are slides. If
Yeah, go ahead.
like, I'm happy to go through them, but if not, then that's what happens.
No, we'd like to see them.
Okay.
And anyone who's not part of this specific part, you're free to leave if you'd like.
We work in partnership and, support one another, so there's always cross-pollination questions you may have, and we want to be here to support.
Well, we're always happy to have you if you guys like to stay after dinner. We have DPW also if you like to stick around.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I can be pretty brief. I just wanted to cover a couple of things with you. My name's Justin Alsace, Chief Data Officer. I think for the last 2 years running, maybe, I've presented something kind of similar, but just to recap kind of the role of the Chief Data Officer, because this is a little bit different than it used to be. It was moved out of BCIT over to the mayor's office under the city administrator. So my job really there is to really promote how we're using data in city government. Really focus on policy, things like data governance, kind of advancing the city's maturity when it comes to use of data. You might have, Councilman Conway, I know you're familiar with this diagram. I think City Administrator Leach presented this at the Office of City Stat hearing, and I think you'll probably see it also at the OPI hearing on Friday afternoon. But just gives you an overview of all the different ways we kind of use data in city government. I wanted to highlight a couple where I kind of lean in, and that's around workforce and capacity, digital services, as CIO Carter mentioned, and data governance. The way I kind of view my work is kind of across those buckets. Oh boy, come on. I think in terms of operations, which is analytics, how we're using data to actually drive decision-making, stewardship, which is about protecting data, improving quality, capacity. So this is really about building the city's capacity, whether it's through training programs, communicating, expanding our partnerships, that sort of thing. So I've got a list kind of some of the objectives that I've had over the last year or so. I think I've managed to make some progress on most of these, but I'm happy to take questions about each of these. Just a couple of examples of projects or initiatives across these three areas. So within operations, I'll cover the digital services team here in a minute. The collapsed rooftop AI, I think we've discussed this before, but I think it's a project we're all really proud of. Using AI and our aerial imagery to identify rooftops that have collapsed so that we can flag these for emergency demolition or alert our firefighters to risks at these buildings. Stewardship, this is things like our open data program. Yes, BCIT does do a lot of the legwork. My role is more around oversight and direction per the city code. The CDO is responsible for the open data program. Capacity, I'm excited to talk about Baltimore Data Academy, which is a new training program we launched in February. A couple of other examples there. Again, I'm happy to speak more on or take questions. I rely heavily on external partnerships, and I think this is one way we've kind of expanded our data capacity in city government. Every agency is resource strapped. We've managed to partner in quite a lot of different ways, whether it's to help us in recruiting and hiring on things like our AI projects. We've been awarded a number of different awards around our city data use. I'm not going to spend any time on this. I think you guys usually request org charts on PARP. This is just the general mayoralty org chart, so I trust that you're familiar with that by now. Okay, so budget. So first I want to say general fund, $0 in allocation, but we did receive ARPA funding for this digital services team. So let me speak for a moment on that. The idea of digital services is to bring really user-centered design and new product management skills, kind of modern software delivery practices to really kind of some of our resident-facing services. So this is kind of a complement of tools and skill sets that really complements the work of BCIT. So we're working on it in a couple of areas. One is with special events permitting. We're piloting a new digital application for special events permitting. We've partnered with BCIT, DOT, of course, BPD and Rec and Parks are also involved. So there are a lot of changes to come on that. For now, we're piloting this initial kind of online application, but there are a lot of other improvements coming on the workflow around that. We're also partnering with BCIT and Fearless around the city website redesign that CIO Carter mentioned earlier. Again, it's about bringing some of the human-centered design expertise to that process. Data Academy that we launched in February, we've already had over 500 enrollments across just the initial 2 courses and about 200 course completions. Baltimore Data Academy, what we've designed these courses to be about is actually improving data literacy, not just among the data analysts in city government, but really among everyone. So this can include folks like our frontline workers. How does data show up in your life? How do you use it in your day-to-day job? It's about investing in our workforce and even building better, a more informed citizenry, more informed residents through data. And I mentioned our AI tool around collapsed rooftops. Last thing I'll mention is that we've developed a new process for tracking MPIA requests. This was a comptroller audit finding. I know it's come up in council hearings previously. What we're going to be doing is using 311 as an intake for MPIA requests. So if you're requesting records from city government, pretty soon you'll be able to use 311 to submit that service request. PIOs and agencies have been trained in using Salesforce to record those requests already. It is not available on the 311 app yet. We've been training up the PIOs to be able to use Salesforce to track these things, but we're expecting within the next month or two to make that live on the app and with our 311 call center so that people can have a streamlined and single kind of point of entry if you're requesting records or data from the government. I'll stop there. That's all I've got. Happy to answer any questions you all have.
Thank you very much. Are you responsible for the open checkbook as well?
Yes. Yep, we developed that about 2 years ago.
Which is on the website I just went on again, the last data upload was also 2 years ago.
Yep.
So, I mean, the whole purpose of Open Checkbook is obviously for transparency and to let people know where their dollars are being spent. But 2 years, what's happened in the past 2 years? Why is that not being updated on a regular basis?
Yep. That's something we're working on currently, again, in partnership with BCIT. So when we developed it, we hadn't transitioned to Workday yet. So, and the way we had to get data for Open Checkbook originally was through a very labor-intensive manual process. Once we started getting close to Workday implementation, we put a pause on having to, and I think this is described on the front page of Open Checkbook around upcoming, Workday implementation. Now that Workday implementation has happened, some of the bugs have gotten worked out, and we have kind of a backlog of some reporting needs out of Workday. This is one of kind of the reporting needs we need from Workday in order to connect this to Workday and begin automation. So we're working on that. We realize it's been a while since that data's been updated, but it was really dependent on getting Workday up and running so that we can integrate.
I mean, Workday is up and running, but since I can't view this information on Open Checkbook, how much are we paying for Open Checkbook?
There's no cost involved. I mean, it's on a dashboard platform that the city uses.
So we don't have to pay anything for the technology or
No,
system?
it's part of our, it's a dashboard tool that most in city government can access and use, at least a lot of our data analysts use, yep.
Gotcha. And when can we expect the next update to occur?
I'll have to get back to you with a timeline. Can we, can that be a request that we kind of follow up on with a timeline for that? There's been mainly capacity issues, but yeah, we'll follow up with a date.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need to get a date as soon as possible, and if you can provide that to the council this week, when that date will be, we'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Councilman Conway?
Justin, big fan of yours, have been for a while. Appreciate the great work you guys do.
Thank you.
And I think what your office has been able to do over the past couple of years is truly admirable. The way that you've been able to sort of leverage big data and look at things from a different perspective and automate a lot of it is important. I would agree with the acting chair that we need to update the acting chair. Update Open Checkbook. I think that's important. I think a big part of your responsibility as Chief Data Officer is transparency, and I think that's something that we have historically struggled with when it comes to data as a city. We put a lot of PDF data sets out there, which is totally useless from a data crunching perspective, and you know that better than anybody. I'm curious, you mentioned in the budget that we increased the number of data sets from 85 to 116. I'm curious what some of those data sets are and what we're seeing reflected in them.
Yeah, 80, the number 86 doesn't...
85. 85 to 116.
Yeah, as I recall in the budget last year, I thought it was closer to 112. I hadn't looked at that number. I mean, I can mention a couple of the ones we have published over the last year. One is, it's funny you mentioned PDFs. I agree, PDFs don't count. So one of the data sets that we published was lobbyist registration data. So this was previously something that was on the Board of Ethics website. You could kind of get a PDF of everyone that was registered. So we worked to make that an open data set. Obviously, tax sale previously hadn't been an open data set, so that was also something that was added. I think there have been a couple of GIS, basically map layers over the past year. I don't think we've made quite as much progress in expanding the number of data, just the sheer number of data sets as we'd like. What we've been focused on is actually improving kind of reliability and access to what we currently have. Yeah, but I can get back to you with, in fact, every year, June 30th, we owe you all an annual report on Open Baltimore, so that will have the listing of all the data sets that have been added over the past year.
There we go. So we can just go ahead and put that in the request.
Yep, stay tuned for the annual report.
Thank you. The other thing I noted was that the number of PIA requests that were handled has now been moved from under you and the reporting for this. I was curious where that data is now captured.
So that's what the 311 service request is designed to handle. So previously that count of MPIA requests was mainly around, it didn't quite capture the full universe of MPIA requests. So anyone can email or call up an agency and ask for records. And if they handle that without contacting our central law department, that there typically wasn't, they are all tracking it themselves. I've seen the spreadsheets. They track these things themselves, but we didn't have, kind of a centralized count of these things. And so that's what the 311 service request is intended to do. Like I said, we've got the PIOs kind of trained up in using Salesforce for I want to say around 15 city agencies. So they're starting to do that. Within, I would say, the next 2 months, we'll kind of make that a publicly available 311 request so that anyone can submit via the 311 app. But that's what that is meant to do, is provide a better count of those requests and better information about what those requests are, what are the rationale for not providing requests, how quickly are we getting to them?
I appreciate that. And what's the timeline to transition to 301?
Yeah, like I mentioned, so the PIOs are already using it.
Okay.
And this is for about 15, I want to say about 15 city agencies that we've trained up. So
Okay.
right now, when they get an email or phone call, they are now logging into Salesforce to record that MPIA request today. So once I think some agencies receive a lot of these and are already kind of in the groove of using Salesforce. Other agencies receive, a very small handful of requests. So we wanted to give our PIOs a little bit of time just to get used to the workflow, the process of, logging into Salesforce, using that to manage this process. So we wanted to make sure everyone had some experience with it before, residents are able to kind of submit their own via the 311 app.
I guess the question I have is more specific to when residents can begin making those requests through 301.
Right.
And more specifically, do we expect many more requests to come in through 301 now that it's going to be a little bit easier?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because I know I use 301 all the time. So.
Right. Yeah. Right. I would say we're targeting July now for this to become publicly available. And as far as an increase in it's a little bit hard to judge. Yeah, there may be an increase. I've in other contexts, this question has come up. Well, if we make this process easier to interact with, like, is it going to increase the workload? In other contexts, I've seen it actually not impact the workload. For instance, when we launched Open Checkbook, there was a little bit of reluctance that, well, we're going to get a lot of questions about, the city's financials and how we're spending money. But the truth was, we didn't actually see a large uptake in phone calls, to agencies about that sort of thing. What's that?
Did it go down?
Well, it's not that, I don't think that was a particular number, like, we don't know the number of calls we get about, but it wasn't like folks were coming to me saying, like, pump the brakes, we're getting too many phone calls. And I think that might be similar here. But also just to say, like, it's our citizens' right to submit MPIA requests and, request their own records and data, and we want to make that easy. So if this does increase the number of folks that are requesting data or records from the government, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and we'll have to address it if there is a large surge.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned that you're working on a solution for the special events permits, which we welcome. I think Director Abbott-Cole has done everything she possibly could. She's just been super overwhelmed. Please include DPW on the list of agencies that gets in there. We just had an issue. I don't want to go into details, but it was crazy. So, because Lake Montebello is not open for a full loop, so people need to know that for their events until it is open. So, but the utilities need to be included in looking at this, because if there's a big hole in the ground and people want to have a festival there, that's not going to work, right? So, just a suggestion to make sure that some of our utilities, all of our utilities, are somehow included in a way, whether it's a notification or you got it. You can figure it out. That would be good. Yeah. Sure. Thank you. That would be great. And then I had a question about the city website redo. I don't know if that was directed to either one of you. The city council's website is also included in that. Is that right? Or just the city website?
I think that question's for CIO Carter. Yeah.
You need to use the microphone. I'm sorry I didn't ask this earlier.
That's okay. It is not part of the scope. It is on a different domain. We did, however, move just a month or so ago the city council's websites to a more stable platform, interpersonal frequency, but it is not part of the scope.
Okay, so the city council's website is still going to remain separate from the city's website? Correct. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. It wasn't clear in the book. So, because that was...
And I noticed the city council's website is a .com versus a .gov. I don't,
Above my pay grade, I can't answer
was
that question.
interesting to
So,
me.
I don't know where that came from. It's I think, legacy. I
Yeah,
think
I
it's a
think- I think
legacy
so.
domain, so that might be, you know,
I mean,
something.
I just noticed it the other day. We'll take a look into
Yeah,
that, but
okay.
I don't know why they did that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Cohn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the BCIT team. Definitely very curious as we approach 2026, which I know is still a few years off, but that is when Comcast's franchise agreement comes up. And I think it is absolutely imperative that we get a better deal for Baltimore out of the franchise. Many of my constituents, and I know many of my colleagues' constituents, are frustrated because whether the PR reps choose to use this word or not, folks feel like they own a monopoly on our conduit, and that the rates that we pay for their not that great internet and TV service are expensive, and since there is no competition, they can essentially do whatever they want. I understand the complexities of the conduit system. I get it, but I think that the past deal did not do enough for Baltimore, and that we need to do much, much, much better. So, and apologies, Director Astley missed the first part of the presentation, but wanted to know, one, sort of how we're thinking about competition and bringing more actors into the space. Know we have great partners in Project Waves and some of the nonprofit folks, but also whether it's possible to bring some of the bigger folks in, because competition in a capitalist country is good and should lower prices and demand a better product. So first question is how we're thinking about bringing competition into the market. And two is, again, I want us to really hone in on 2026 and not just wait until we're at the doorstep of the Comcast franchise renewal agreement, because I think that what often happens in the city is that we wait until the last minute and then we sell ourselves short and we don't negotiate hard enough on behalf of the people that we represent. So, two-part question, competition, and also thinking about 2026 and our preparation to really drive a harder bargain on behalf of the people that live here.
So thank you for that question. Regarding the competition, a couple of things that the Queen, newly anointed Queen, mentioned was that, one, we are looking to use the market to deploy or to figure out how to deploy to public housing, but also when we look at the expansion beyond public housing, we would look for the market to do that as well, to bring competition in. We share your thoughts on competition can get us better pricing, better services at a better cost, and give us alternatives that maybe we don't have today. So those are two strategies that were outlined specifically for the immediate, the harbor HABC properties, but also for the expansion of broadband services throughout the city. Regarding the Comcast service agreement.
And just real quick, sure. Director, can you share a little bit about what that looks like in terms of trying to induce competition into the market? I mean, I understand the piece about working with HABC, and I think it's sort of two separate issues. One is the digital divide, where we have parts of our city that are Wi-Fi deserts and still, lack access, and connecting folks who are living in public housing is incredibly important. And I would say this, the second thing is in other American cities where you have a Comcast and a Verizon and a Google and other folks, middle-class people, working-class people, regular workaday people are able to get a better product. And I want to be clear, this is not a knock on Comcast, because I think that they're a savvy negotiator and they have done an effective job of advocating for their own product and their shareholders. And I do think they are deeply committed to Baltimore, but I don't think we've gotten the best, we, the city, have gotten the best deal for the people we represent. So I hear you on the public housing, but in terms of, is there movement to try to bring other competitors into the space? What's it look like?
So here's what we know, and Director Owsley can add to what I say. When we are looking at just HABC, we use a consultant called CTC, and CTC has been working in this space for quite some time across the country and has insights into what other jurisdictions, other municipalities are doing. They held listening sessions to gain interest into Baltimore from other market players around the country. And it's from that informed us that yes, we do have people that are interested in coming in for the work that we're doing in broadband space. And I'll ask, Kenya, you have anything to add to that?
Nothing specific, but we did complete, our consultant completed a market sounding, had really good conversations with a variety of providers from P3s to actual ISPs that are already doing business. Some are already doing business in the state of Maryland. So where we are now, now that we've heard what what the market is looking for in a city, we're in a better position to craft an RFP. We intend to have the RFP completed this summer and then release that RFP so that we can primarily identify an ISP for public housing. But as I shared earlier, because we have a focus on expanding our infrastructure network through our senior center connections, our connections to public housing and to rec centers, and even our public Wi-Fi. Now we have tentacles in multiple neighborhoods. That is attractive, very attractive to a company that does not want to invest, because the infrastructure investment is heavy. Right. And it has in the past, I believe, kept a number of competitors out of our market. But now because we are extending our infrastructure into a myriad of neighborhoods, now we have more of a package we can advertise to get more competition into the city. Great.
I do appreciate that, and I think that brings me to my second question around the franchise agreement, which I do think, to your point, Director, contributes to why other folks may not want to participate. And so, again, as we start gearing up, I know we're not there yet, we're a couple years off, but I always believe that you gotta prepare and you gotta come early. How are we thinking about those negotiations, that conversation? And this is just for my own edification, but is there a world in which we don't, we try to split the market more evenly and have multiple players getting a piece of the franchise instead of just one dominant incumbent that takes the largest share?
Now,
if you can just be brief in your response, because we're a few minutes over and we have, so if you can just give this brief, thanks.
So we are thinking about that for the same reasons you're thinking about it. We've gathered a number of key players together. We've had one meeting so far. I literally just had a lengthy discussion with Law about what consultant can help us figure out what the strategies are. On my desk right now, I have a copy of the Comcast agreement. So we recognize that we have to start sooner to get ready for an actual renegotiation, which includes the provision of making sure that we have for instance, a public hearing just to open up, open up the discussion. So it is something for the same reasons that you're thinking. We know we need to start now so that we can be ready and get a good agreement. And we recognize that there are multiple types of opportunities within that current contract, within the assets that we own that can give us a better deal across all of Baltimore City. So we'll gladly give you an update as we build the momentum, but this is something that's top of mind for us.
I would appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the work you're doing.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Just one last thing, Director. I looked up on Whois domain register search, and BaltimoreCityCouncil.com is owned by BCIT. It was registered by Bruce Gibbons. And so just to defend the honor of the city council. But anyways, you guys can figure that out later on, but the case is solved, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.